He picked up his AK-47. He says, this is how you change the world. And we're doing that right now. And I thought to myself, wow. And I was completely enamored by them at that stage. I was bit by the jihadi bug, as I call it. I always give this example of chapter 9, verse 5. You know, it says, kill the unbelievers wherever you find them. Further deepening and solidifying and anchoring of my views. I recruit other kids. I'm preaching this jihadi mentality.
For the next 6 years, he devoted himself to the cause and wondered how he might join the fight. He saw friends go to the Middle East. Some did not return. And he had the opportunity to go himself.
Now I was exposed to people who could get me to Yemen. Just say the word, Mubin, and we'll have you go. And I was on that line, and I could have at any point gone.
He was a radical, but a radical with some nagging doubts.
The things that kept me from that was the, stable home environment. Both my parents were there. I had a relatively good education. I had a very good cross-cultural experience. So the idea of hating kuffar, non-Muslims, to the point where I can just kill them wantonly, that was difficult to get around because they were my friends. They were people that I knew and I interacted with.
حيث ثقفتم ما فيش بنعرفش حدد وين ما بنستطيع سنقاوم.
Vous a été donné de combattre le mécréant où que vous le trouviez. Qu'attendez-vous?
He summed up the whole message of Islam as a moral message. So that should be reflected in our educational process. And Islamized education has that as its focus. It should be worked into the lesson plan the same way they have to deliver these subjects and certain aspects of the subjects. The Islamic content needs to be also worked in.
Islamization of knowledge. So we want to Islamize all sciences, whether it's biology or physics or medical science, and then you go to community and then society and to country. And that's how the entire nation is reformed.
I can be very confident to tell you that we are on the road to the White House, to the Congress, to the decision-making everywhere in the United States. Whether we are in Michigan and whether we are in Jenin, believe me, everyone should fight within his means. They will fight with stones. Others will fight with guns. Others will fight with planes, drones. And others will fight with rockets.
This is already a world war. It is already World War III. Now, what do I mean by that? Mahmoud al-Zahar, another Hamas official, he said, this is not just a conflict with Gaza. See, people think if they get their Palestinian state, then it'll be okay. Or if they destroy Israel even, it'll be okay. No, Mahmoud al-Zahar said, this is a conflict with any system of unbelief, and we're going to destroy Christianity, we're going to destroy the other religions, and Islam will reign supreme. Now, is Islam going to rule the world? I don't think so. But are they going to kill a lot of people trying? Absolutely. Is anybody paying attention to that? No. That is not a question that anybody is willing to consider because it would be Islamophobic to do so. And so this is the truth of this conflict. Even if, God forbid, Israel were destroyed in this conflict, which I don't think it will be, but even if in the worst case scenario that were to happen, there would still not be peace in the Middle East. Instead, you'd have emboldened jihadis moving against Europe and against the United States.
Jihad. And there's really not a dime's worth of difference between the various adherents to Sharia and the program that they follow, because it is all governed by that doctrine. And what does that mean? That means it is their obligation to use violence wherever possible to achieve the triumph of Islam worldwide.
يعني نحن نريد أن نفتح روما مش بس عشان نبين يعني قوة الدولة من ناحية البلطجة مثل أمريكا، لا، عشان يعني نطفئ الشرك في الفاتيكان واستعادة الأندلس. والدولة الإسلامية تؤمن بشيء واحد، بحمل الدعوة وبالجهاد. تحمل الدعوة وتحرك الجيوش لحكم الأرض بالإسلام.
لن نستطيع أن نرد أمريكا إلا إذا أقمنا خلافة ووضع الخليفة يده وإصبعه على زره النووي.
How do we as a Western society remain free and defend ourselves against this totalitarian ideology?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize that it is indeed a totalitarian ideology. It is an ideology that, I think there are a few things that you have. Persecution, they play the victim card. Now, to go back to Muhammad in Mecca and Medina, I think the biggest achievement in a Mecca narrative is that he says that Muslims were persecuted. Now listen, if you go around knocking on people's doors and telling them to give up their gods, you will be rejected. And if you perceive that as persecution, that's one way of doing it. But the idea of persecution, the idea of playing the victim card, that is baked into the religion from the get-go. If you then take that and you see how it's being applied now to white guilt because of colonialism, imperialism, the history of the West, which ironically, it is only the West that has corrected it. China has not corrected its history of slavery and colonialism and you name it. Neither has India, neither has the Muslim world. In fact, the Muslim world continues to do that. So the only civilization that has in fact come to terms with its history of, shall I say, things that they're not proud of, that's the society that's being punished. That's number one. Number two, communism and National Socialism, these are the two isms that Islam is compared to. But both isms are quite young. Islam has been around for nearly 1,400 years, 1,450, maybe even 1,500 years. So it's been around for a long time. And I think that's another thing that Westerners don't get, and maybe the rest of the world doesn't get. But I live in the West, and I come from the House of Islam, and I'm now in Dar al-Harb, the House of War, and in this particular setting, a House of Islam. People don't get that. It's been around for a long time. They've been conquering and manipulating, and they're used to retreating and conquering and being on top and being down and being on top. And so I think that's another thing that makes us think of, I don't know, in many ways feel, how do you say this, kind of sleep and complacent. Complacent is the word. We are complacent. We think, you know what, they need to catch up with modernity.
Islam is a religion of peace, yes. The peace that Islam envisions is the peace that will come when the whole world is ruled by Islamic law, and Muslims have the obligation to wage war against non-Muslims until that time. And so it's a religion of violence and hatred and supremacism, ultimately culminating in an era of peace that will see the essential enslavement of non-Muslims.
I think what's happening in Europe is really an object lesson for us here. We're not facing at the moment, partly because of geography, anything like the flows of so-called refugees or migrants. People making what I think of as the hijra, the term used by the Muslims that goes back to Muhammad's time when he migrated from Mecca to Medina. Ever since, it has been one of the techniques of spreading the faith to migrate or colonize.
He said, no, Allah permitted them to live off the infidel while they are subduing them. So it had sort of a parasitic type of attitude where they can live off of the host country, where their goal is to eventually eradicate the host culture and supplant it with Islam.
Now the responsibility of punishing the disbelievers, keeping them away from misguiding people, is given to the believers on earth. If the believers stick to the guidance, follow the deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid them, will support them against the disbelievers, and through the act of jihad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish the disbelievers, the hypocrites. It has to happen at the hands of the believers, the jihad, the act of jihad. And that continued on with the Sharia of Islam.
Prophet said, fight the pagans, fight the kuffar with your tongue, with your pens, and with your hands. There's times and places for different types of jihad.
Muhammad made it very clear. You spread the religion by word of mouth, by example, but also by the sword, by violence.
Jihad for the sake of Allah. You accept Islam, you pay jizya, it's war.
You invade this non-Muslim country and you come and put the sword on the heads of the people. You say to them, Aslim taslam. Submit, become Muslim or you'll die. They say to you, no, I don't want to become Muslim. You say to them, all right, you have to pay the jizya. Have you heard of what jizya? Jizya is like a tax that you have to pay. Okay, you don't want to pay the tax, then you'll get killed. This is the offensive jihad.
Jihad al-talab, and that's what has to do with da'wah. What triggers this jihad, by the way, is conveying Islam to non-Muslims. That you go out there to a community and you let them know, listen, I need to let your people know about Islam. You have three choices. Fight, jizya, or you allow us in. I know this sounds weird, but that's how it is.
You should fight those empires around you, or those hukumat around you, which are Jew or Christian, until they give the jizya. That's fine. That we already know Islam allows. And then the howness of that is in the hadith. The three options that they're given: either you give the jizya, or you do this, or you do that. Yeah, we're not apologetic about that point. That is true.